Shall I pass it over to you, Lisa? You can present the report.
Yes. Yeah, I can introduce it. Okay. Yeah. So this is an application for a two-storey rear extension unamended from August full council. There are no updates to report, and the recommendation remains unchanged from the previous full council meetings. The report following the outcome of August full council has been prepared by the planning officer. I think the mic went off. Do you want me to repeat that?
Would you mind?
Yeah. So an update report in the agenda has been prepared following the outcome of full council by the planning officer and sets out the need for decisions to be based on material planning reasons. This is so any persons with an interest in an application can transparently understand the rationale of the decision. So that's the summary update report that is in the agenda.
Chairman, I'd like to propose the recommendation that the application be refused. I'm in agreement with the recommendation that the submitted plans have not changed from last time. They are there's a detriment to the other properties in the area. For that reason, I agree with the proposal.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to say that the recommendation is a subjective view from the officers, and looking at the application, in my view, I would disagree with that recommendation, and that on balance I would consider that the reduction in the scale of the application and in view of other extensions that have been permitted in that area, that it is not overbearing and dominant, and I would therefore propose that the application be accepted for approval.
I would like to second Councillor Francis's recommendation.
We have to take the proposals as they are in order. Monitoring Officer Matt.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarification, and of course that is a proposal that you're absolutely entitled to make, but are you suggesting that it's with or without conditions?
I would suggest that any conditions are made by the planning department.
And Chair, is the seconder happy to take that on?
Yes.
Right. Further comments? Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chairman. We now have two proposals on the table, and as the Chairman has said, we'll be voting in the order that they were proposed. But I would just like to suggest that if councillors were minded to accept the recommendation, I would like to add a recommendation that the planning officer consider recommending obscure glass to windows that might that will overlook adjoining properties, and consider together with the applicant the possibility of restricted opening to those windows, if that would help ameliorate any overlooking that will occur.
Councillor Sims.
One of the objectives spoke to me not that long ago and said something I thought was quite pertinent. I live across the road, literally 30 feet away. And he said to me, what do you think everybody else living there would think if I put a two-storey extension up in my backyard? Which I don't think is significantly different. And I don't think they'd run with it at all. I think extraordinarily overbearing. And also, if you look along there, there is nothing for a considerable distance which goes above 1 story, except for a sort of rather odd stair entrance on stilts. It was just completely out of character with the rest of that area. The fact that the road, if a road went through there, I don't think we'd even be looking at this. So I would very strongly support supporting the recommendation the Planning Department has made.
Councillor Dorian Smith.
Chairman, I think one of the key points here is that this application has been before the Council a number of times, and in each case the officer recommendation has been very clear and consistent. It's worth noting too that there are quite a few more objections. As I understand it, it's referred to as 10 letters objecting, 3 in support. From a purely planning point of view, I would have thought that this Council has to take heed of that very clear advice our planning officers, because this is not a question of being a narrow dividing line where there seems to be options available. Now, I fully understand that there's strong feelings on both sides, but quite honestly, I think in danger as a council if we go against officers' advice when there's 2 clear issues here. One is that the proposed addition is too dominant, and the other is that it's detrimental to neighbouring properties. There's other reasons as well, but I think taking that into account, we should support the recommendation and support the officer's advice.
Any other comments?
Something I forgot to say. I understand from the previous meeting that when it was deferred in effect, that in order for the application to be passed, we had to find a clear planning reason which overrode all the very obvious planning reasons not for this structure not to go up, and I certainly haven't heard a clear planning reason which countermands the objections that the planning department put forward, and also the large number of objections from the public.
All right. If there are no other comments, I'm sorry. Councillor Barkley.
Thank you. I still hold to my original statements in previous meetings, which is that in planning terms, we do have to also surely consider the social and economic welfare of the islands. And this is a young local family who are in a business all year round. And I think when we look at the local plan, if I can be assured that there will be no social nor economic statements, then I would support the recommendation, but not otherwise, no.
Right. Monitoring Officer, Mr. Stokes.
Thank you, Chair. That it's a young local family is not a material planning consideration, and so you should not take that into account. In relation to what Councillor Sims said, I need to ask Councillor Francis a question, and that question is, from having heard what you've said, your proposal, you said that you thought the reduction in scale of the application meant that it wasn't overbearing or dominant, and you were therefore proposing approval. Am I right in understanding that you are therefore saying that in your view the application isn't contrary to the planning policies that are set out in the recommendation for refusal? I just need to understand that, please.
So I'd like to make 2 points in answer to that, Mr. Chairman. Firstly, I understand the advice that I've received is that planning law now is such that we should be minded to approve, which previously was not the case, and therefore we had to set reasons why we would not approve, rather than conversely giving reasons to approve. However, in answer to your question, I do not consider that the reasons
Robert, you've gone off.
Sorry, if we do not agree with what has been stated by the officers, then on planning terms, these recommendations are not valid. Therefore, another view should be put forward, which is what I have put forward for approval.
Sorry, Councillor Francis, I think there's been a misunderstanding. That's not what I was asking. I was just trying to clarify what you were proposing, just so that everybody is clear. And I quite acknowledge that you can come to a different view, and I'm not suggesting you shouldn't. But in saying, my clarification that I sought was that in saying that you thought the reduction in scale of the application meant that the extension wasn't overbearing or dominant, am I right in understanding, therefore, that in your opinion, the application isn't contrary to the policies that are set out in the reasons for refusal?
Yes, you are correct.
Thank you. Chair, may I make another point? And Councillor Francis, you're absolutely right to say that the statutory position is that if you're approving, you don't have to give reasons. However, you have given reasons, which is helpful. But there is a growing body of case law and some local government ombudsman's decisions which are pushing authorities towards giving reasons for approval, even though the statutory position has changed, so that everybody with an interest in an application can understand the basis upon which the authority has made a decision. So it's helpful that you've given reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would support Councillor Francis' position. I consider that the reasons the officers give are subjective. In fact, at 2.4 they say would appear unacceptably overbearing, an unacceptable loss of outlook are subjective matters which are not accurately measurable. And I would support that the alterations with the conditions suggested by the Vice Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Obviously, a very contentious issue here. I've been a planner for 5 years, and it has never come to my attention before that the monitoring officer would send 2 emails to members on a planning application. And my question is it normal? Is this a one-off, or will it be happening again?
For that, the emails were sent with my permission. He consulted with me so that members had a clear view of the legal position that we stood in, because this is a complex and controversial issue. The monitoring officer phoned me personally and asked me whether it was appropriate, and I decided yes, it was.
So it was with your backing that the 2 emails were sent? Okay,
yes.
That's fine. I just thought with limited resources, it was a lot of time spent. That's my personal opinion, and I'm stating it for the record.
I understand exactly what you're saying, but I
And
thought...
at the end of the day, Chairman, we're elected members and we are entitled to make our own decision on how we feel at this meeting.
That's exactly what the email said. Right. Are there any other comments before I take it to the vote?
Yes, I would just like to say that I found the letter extremely helpful. And I do disagree with Councillor Francis, because although the top story has been taken down, it was a flat roof, which has now gone to a ridged roof. I think I'm right in saying Mr. Planning Officer could...
It's gone from a lean-to off the dormer extension down to a lower gable design.
So actually the height has not come down?
It no longer contains accommodation in the roof space, but it's a 2-storey extension.
Still, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt? Can... Right, thank you. We just had some procedural clarification there from the monitoring officer. Sorry for the delay. Right, and if there are no other points of view or questions, I propose to take it to the vote, and we'll take the first proposal, which was for refusal, first. All those in favour of refusing, please show clearly. Of course. You got that? I don't vote. Right, thank you. All those against? Seven. So the proposal to refuse is lost. The second proposal was to accept the planning application on the grounds that Councillor Francis did. Councillor Grottick did suggest some conditions to that, as in obscure glass and opening windows. If you are content with that amendment, I will take that to the vote. Are you content with that?
Are these the only conditions that are going to be on the property? Because all the other conditions, all the other planning applications have got a couple of pages of conditions. Are there going to be other conditions that's standard?
Monitoring officer.
If I've understood correctly from my question earlier to Councillor Francis, he said that his proposal included a requirement for Mr Dryden to sort out conditions. So if Councillor Francis is prepared to take on Vice Chairman's suggestion as to obscure glass and what have you, I think that stands with, and Mr Dryden resolving other conditions to which the approval should be subject. Is that correct?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Councillor Grottick.
Just to explain and clarify, the conditions that were the normal standard conditions will, I imagine, be left to the discretion of the planning officer, such as the hours of working and the usual conditions. I suggested that in consultation with the applicant, we might condition the use of obscure glass to the windows that overlook other properties and restricted opening, if appropriate, with the requirement for fresh air and other issues.
Are you content with that additional condition? Right. Then I'll take that to the vote. The proposal is to accept with the additional conditions and the conditions laid down by the planning officers. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried to accept the proposal with those conditions. Moving on, agenda item 9. Land adjacent to the quayside on Briar. I shall just wait until the people have left. Right. Planning officer, Lisa.
Yeah. Agenda item 9, this is for a new dwelling on Briar. A report has been prepared by the planning officer and sets out the issues assessed for a replacement new dwelling on Briar. The dwelling proposed replaces a now demolished dwelling at Cynithan. The demolition of Cynithan was approved in November Planning Committee as part of the application for the construction of a fish processing building for a local business, Island Fish. It has been a clear intention of the Duchy to replace the dwelling at Cynithan with a new dwelling to ensure that there is no net loss in residential accommodation on Briar. And this was clearly indicated in the Cynithan Island Fish application, for which 9 letters of support were received. The proposed site has been chosen as a more suitable site for a new dwelling, as it would align with the more recent accommodation provided by Cornwall Rural Housing Association, and the application submitted notes that the location has been carefully chosen and will provide a low-impact setting whilst providing good access to the rest of the island. As you'll see from the report, the application has been found to be acceptable and, subject to the conditions, is recommended for approval.
I would support this approval as recommended by the planning officer. It's worth noting that there's been no representations from the community at all, so we take that as a positive sign. And yeah, I would support the approval.
Councillor Barclay.
I did provide residents of Briar with a link to the planning application, but have had no adverse comments, and I think the site is well suited to an additional building there, and I would support this application.
Councillor Dorian Smith.
I was going to second the proposal to accept the recommendation.
Councillor Smith.
I would echo comments that I think the design and the site are very appropriate, and I would support approval.
Any further comments? Right. All those in favour of the proposal? That's unanimous, thank you. Agenda item 10. 32 to 42 Sallyport. Lisa.
Yeah, so the report has been prepared by the planning officer and sets out the issues assessed for the refurbishment works to the 6 dwellings at Sallyport. The works are required to upgrade aspects of the building's thermal efficiency, as well as improve the appearance of the 2 blocks of council homes. The proposal includes repainting the exterior with a thermal efficient render and paint. You may note that the colour scheme was originally identified as a range of pastel colours similar to that approved on the Strand council homes and reflects properties on the Parade. This was later changed to be a simple white finish, and as such, officers have recommended a condition that allows the precise colour finish to be approved by condition to reflect members' wider views on that. However, as you'll see from the report, it is considered to be acceptable and is recommended for approval.
Before this goes out to debate, I'd like to ask a question, please. The last bullet point on page 61 talks about replacing asbestos tiles and whatever. Is there a possibility that these may be replaced at a later date with PV cells at all under the smart gardens or not?
Yeah, I think the roof requires the solar installation of. No. I think it's committed to that. I think the sorry, the replacement tiles are needed to put the panels on. I think if the building is listed, we would certainly resist the use of a man-made tile. For modern properties, we do accept, it would be preferential to have a natural slate, but we accept these are modern buildings where a man-made slate is often a positive change to the building and can have a positive effect. So it depends on the building.
Councillor Sims?
I would like to propose this recommendation. I just wanted to query with the planning officers. This strikes me as a perfect example of a planning application that should have just been delegated. Because I can't imagine anybody objecting to this. I'm asking because I'm not quite sure how the criteria.
It's a council-owned development.
I understand completely. Okay, fine. Makes sense, yeah. Sorry.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, query on page 66 under pre-commencement condition 4 about the colour finish. Now, I thought that was already detailed in the recommendation about the colour finish of the walls.
Can you just say that again?
So, on condition 4, page 66, it asks that the colour finish of the walls detailed before permission is given.
Yes.
Is that not already detailed in the plan?
It is detailed in the plan, but we thought we'd give members the option. Is there a preference for white as it's been changed to, or for the original pastel?
Well, I would make a comment on that, and I would say that actually I think there has been a plethora of brilliant white painted buildings around the islands, and I believe that the white is actually a better colour, just to dull slightly the appearance of buildings. So I think a brilliant white does stand out considerably.
Personally, yeah, I would support the recommendation and personally go for some pastel shades.
I'm getting the feeling then that pastel shades are fashionable at the moment. With the absence of any other comments, I'll take that.
Thank you, Chairman. I think there are very strong social and economic benefits through this proposal, which also makes use of an underused, redundant site at the moment, so I think that's very good. I would just like to propose consideration of one more condition, and that's related to travel and transport around the site. This has potential for more spaces, which will generate more foot traffic, bike traffic and car traffic. Other proposals for the site could be discussed in the near future, which again could bring more vehicular traffic to this area. So there's a conflict between very small children and lots of car access. So I'd like whether it's a planning condition or looked at by children's services and wellbeing staff colleagues, that the travel and transport strategy for the wider use of the building is refreshed.
With that thought in mind, I don't think it is a planning condition, is it? It's a recommendation. Is that correct, Craig?
If actually we could actually put a planning condition requesting a travel plan for that particular resolution. There is actually one in place for the school and actually for the health and wellbeing centre. So it might be actually a refreshing travel plan to actually accommodate the extension.
In that case, are you minded to accept that as a condition? Fine. with that condition, sorry, Councillor Smith.
Well, I would just support what Councillor Williams said. I agree that there is an issue around there with a mix of small children and traffic. I know that from personal experience, so I think that would be good to see. And just to reiterate, 5.2 says how important it is a community facility to the residents of St Mary's and off-islands, I would add in there as well. There's an awful lot of off-islands parents using it, and I would fully support this proposal.
Yes, I entirely agree with that. With those addendums, as opposed to amendments, I propose to take that to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Agenda item 12. I propose to take agenda item 12 and agenda item 13 as one. The reason being is that the normal procedure is that we approve listed building consent and planning within one motion. This has been prepared by Exmoor, which didn't really take into account the fact that our normal procedures. I have consulted with the planning officer about this, and it's entirely acceptable to the planning office. So we're talking in terms of Crabinic House. Are there any comments, please? Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chairman. I would just like to draw members' attention to page 92, 3.3, where the Farm Rescue Service actually sorry, not the Farm Rescue Service, the Water and Sewage Department requests that we require the applicant to connect units to the road. I note that we're actually only asking that the new units, new studio units, be connected. Do we have any consultation or discussion about this, because the sewage system is under great pressure on that particular ward?
Obviously, we're looking at planning applications specifically. So, in terms of planning use conditions, it's got to be related to the public respectively actually ask for connection.
Fair enough, so.
And extend that into the process of negotiation. We can go then I would suggest that the condition of that is as text, which needs to be text.
I'm comfortable with that. Could I ask you to negotiate with the applicants that we might be able to beneficially improve?
Any other comment? Mr. Sims?
I'm happy to propose both.
12
and 13, yeah.
In that case, take it to the vote. All those in favour? Right, before we take questions, I'd like to first put on note my thanks and the thanks of this council to Andy and all his staff for the hard work in getting to this. I know I've pressed him, and so has the Vice Chair, very much so for this sort of information. We have had a complicated issue to start with, which we are all aware of, and untangling that has taken a lot of time and a lot of effort, and for that, Andy, we thank you very much indeed. Another comment I would like to make is that at lunchtime I just happened to switch the news on, and the Governor of the Bank of England is actually hinting that interest rates are going to go up in the very near future. So I think that decision as far as the extra borrowing is going to be taken within the immediate future. Is that correct, Andy?
So we can keep watch on your chairs.
Yeah, I thought you would. Okay, in that case I'll open the debate up, and any questions to the floor, please. Councillor Francis.
It's not actually a question of our 151 officer, Mr. Chairman. I would echo your comments about how well we seem to be doing, actually now trying to get some order of semblance into our financial situation. But what does seriously worry me, which cannot be swept under the carpet in my view, although we're talking about 2016-17 year and not the current year, and I was very heartened to hear this morning from two of our senior managers that actually we seem to be pretty much on budget this year. But it does worry me why senior managers and indeed our chief executive officer were not on top of this spending in 16-17, why we were allowed to, why they were allowed to overspend in the just short of £250,000. And I think you know, at some stage, I'm not suggesting in this meeting, Mr. Chairman, but I think, you know, we've got to make sure that in future we keep to a budget that's been set, and we should not be in a situation where this kind of overspending can occur without sanction of the members. I mean, it's quite clear, and we talked about Park House this morning, that there may well be areas where we have to overspend. You know, I understand that. But we shouldn't just find out at this stage that we've had that level of overspending without sanction of the members. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Vice Chair.
Thank you. For the benefit of members who might not have been with us this morning, I'd just like to say that Andy Brown has confirmed that we will be having a look at the agreed capital budget soon. We will be reviewing it before Christmas. I would also like his opinion in a moment on page 108, 2.10, and I do note with some concerns the transfer of earmarked reserves, and obviously we've got to balance the books, that's a legal requirement, but I hope Mr. Brown would agree that this is not something we're going to be doing on a regular basis. And lastly, I would hope that the savings monitoring could be continued, and possibly we could do more regular monitoring of the savings, because if we don't have a savings plan that is actually being regularly monitored, then we've got no way that we're going to get to the end of the year and come out with what we think we're going to come out with. And I also would like to echo the Chairman's thanks to Mr. Brown and his team, who've worked extremely hard to get us to a better place. So hopefully that will continue. Thank you very much.
Do you want to respond to that, Andy?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, in terms of paragraph 210 on page 108, it won't be happening on a regular basis, simply because you can only do it once. The money is only there once. There won't be an opportunity to do what we've done to readdress the position on the balance, on the general fund balance in future. So, if we continue overspending, that is unsustainable for the council. In terms of the savings monitor, yes, I totally agree. Good practice is to receive regular budget monitoring reports during the year, and also in lieu with that, also receive progress on how officers are achieving their savings. I think reality bites in terms of expectations with the issues that we have in terms of the systems and the quality of the data, and we'll come on to that report in a minute in terms of the current financial year. That's the focus. In terms of the direction of travel, we will get to a position where we can monitor savings and have more enhanced monitoring, but I think it's first steps first. Let's get the quality of the data and the reporting right before we can make further inroads into that position.
I'd just like to add my comment to that, is that as soon as the new systems are operable and workable properly rather than their initiation phase, that monitoring information will be considerably more readily available to us all, and that will make marvellous progress as far as we're concerned, as far as an authority is concerned, which we will be information that which we have never had on a regular basis in the past while I've been an elected member. Councillor Guy. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you. My comment follows on from Councillor Francis, and I would find it helpful in this report for a little bit of narrative about where the overspends were, and that would also apply to the subsequent report. I would just urge, as with the monitoring reports, that there's some narrative in there, so it's not pure financial. There's a story being told about why there's an overspend, why there's an underspend, and the impact that would be on services.
I will say, I'd just like to thank the Brown for the report. Number 4, where it says that you can hand over just short of 15k, there is a possibility of an extra 5, but for the record, I'm just mentioning we haven't got an overspend as far as I'm aware, and we will not be asking for 5,000.
Thank you. Echo report what Councillor Francis said. On 2.10, in terms of the general fund reserve, I mean, it does seem like the transfer of unallocated grants is something for
Thank you, Chair. Lights back on again. So this is the revenue budget monitoring for the position at the end of August 2017 for the current financial year. So this is the first report that members have had for this financial year. As I said, the focus has been on dealing with the 16-17 financial year. So most of the resource that we have available has been used in terms of preparing the closure of accounts for that year. So this really is a report that should be heavily caveated in terms of data quality coming out of the system. So some of the things that we've had to do for the closure of accounts for 16-17 in terms of control reconciliations, clearing out of elements of the balance sheet, so on and so forth, that hasn't been applied to this set of data. So that's why I've heavily caveated it. Saying that, we have been able to pull out from the system the spend position, the net spend position for the end of August, and that's shown in appendix on page 114. Encouragingly, although I do say that with the heavy caveat that I've just given, is that as at the position at end of August, it does seem that the council is broadly balanced. However, as detailed within the report, there are some significant variances against the current approved budget, and those will need further analysis now that we are towards the end of preparing the accounts for 16-17, we can now focus on resource and supporting officers in understanding their budgets and the position that they find themselves in, so that they can actually actively manage that position. Some of the things in terms of the budget, so the budget that we set this year was based on historical information and effectively a zero-based position. It may not be that is the most accurate budget going forward. So it's just in terms of where you see significant variances, it may be because the historical information wasn't accurate, and we need to bear in mind that when looking at variances. But that it goes into the same respect in terms of the narrative that hopefully you will begin to see and added to the report in terms of that detailed analysis which I was talking about, is why these overspends or underspends are occurring, what are the costs drivers behind them, because that is the indication of where management action can be applied to mitigate that overspend. So the position, as I say, early information, heavily caveated, looks broadly positive, but as I say, there's a lot of work still to be undertaken in terms of data quality within the system. Just lastly, I would say that in terms of financial position that I've provided an update, we've set a target go-live date for the new system from 1st of March 2018, and that's so that we can move on to the new system for the closure of accounts to be undertaken for this financial year on the new system. If we can move quicker, we will, although I'm conscious that the 1st of March date is ambitious in itself as well. And in advance of that, I'm pleased to say we undertook a parallel pay run in September, and we'll be moving to the Cornwall Council's payroll system from October 2017. The future financial systems around council tax and business rates and income collection will also be moving over during a phased process at that point in time. I'll leave it there. Happy to take any questions. I would say that is the $1 million question in terms of the confidence around the figures. I think I'd be so. The focus has been on 16-17 closure of accounts. As I say, we will now begin the control process and cleaning up the first 5 months of this year. I'm hoping, therefore, by the end of this year, calendar year, so effectively Q3, that I'll have some robustness and confidence moving into Q4 of the quality of the data, because what the focus in terms of the new financial system is going to be is that I don't want to transfer information that is not of good quality, to put it nicely, into the new system. Because we need to undertake quite a significant piece of work to cleanse that data before we transfer those balances from the old system into the new system. And so with the target date of the 1st of March, the data has to be of good quality before we transfer it over. So in terms of looking at that cleanse, I'm looking at cleansing up to Q3 of this financial year. So in theory, the report that I present to you on the Q3 information, I should be giving it with a significant degree of confidence, better than we're currently giving at the moment.
Yeah, paragraph 2.1, it says at the end of that paragraph that you're expecting the trading accounts to contribute over 200,000 to the budget, but previously last year the trading accounts actually cost us 120,000. So what's the cause of that turnaround now? Why is that? Why are we going to make money from them?
So that was what the budget was set on in terms of the training accounts have budgeted to make a surplus. One of the analysis that we need to undertake is in terms of the internal charges that are made to the trading accounts and the funding of capital spend. So where in the outturn that they did, I think the water and sewage made a surplus, but the airport actually made a loss. But that's in terms of the system. In terms of that was the information coming out of the systems. Is that data being captured correctly? There's questions around that. So that's one of the areas that we're looking to cleanse. In terms of the budget, that's what we budgeted in terms of we assumed that the training accounts are going to make a surplus and we're going to use an element of that to balance the budget. We've now got to make sure that in terms of what's happening this financial year, that is actually playing out in terms of the reality and the actuals. But that is an area that I think where I've focused on the areas of significant variances within the services, so adult services and central services within the report. Trading accounts is another area that is an area that I'll be looking at because of the outturn position from last financial year.
Thank you, Chair. Again, on 2.1, just in terms of the savings target identified of just over 600,000, do we have a steer on how much that is either implemented or going to be implemented?
So I haven't got a steer as such, and to a certain extent, and this is what I was talking about in terms of the savings monitor. In normal circumstances, I'd be expecting to say of that 609,000, how much do we think has been delivered? A large chunk of that was related to waste, and because the areas around waste look like their budget as it stands is balanced, then that would indicate that the costs within that area are broadly under control. Quite happy to defer to Craig to comment on the saving proposal because he's the senior manager responsible, but from a financial perspective, I haven't asked the senior managers to comment on their delivery so far, but we will be doing that and implementing a savings monitor. But just from looking at it from the numbers perspective, it would suggest to me that the budget is balanced. Whether that means the saving has been delivered as planned or it's other reasons for that is unclear.
Use that.
I'd like to ask a question, please, Geraldine, if you don't mind. I understand that the SIPFA regulations are changing as far as presentation are concerned. Is that going to impinge on what Andy's doing on the current year, so that we have to present them in the new format for the old year for sign-off this year?
Yes.
Does that mean he's going to be doing 2 lots of work?
No. So, in answer to the question, Chair, the changes to the presentation, which is a new SIPFA requirement, starts in 16-17. He has to produce his draft financial statements in the new format for 16-17, the old year.
Right.
Once he's done that, he can roll forward that presentation and formatting into 17, 18 and beyond. So he only has to do it once.
That's fine. I was just concerned that there was we were double bubbling it, basically, that was all. Right, Councillor Sims.
On 120, the debtors and also the grant funding, which was not available, it's 546k, I think. How is that related to the overspend that we had last year? In page. I know, it just sort of relates back to a question that Robert asked earlier on. So that this was essentially incorrect accounting as opposed to a literal, real-world overspend.
Andy?
So just to clarify, this is 15-16? Yeah. So the overspend in 15-16 was part of one of the issues that I delayed the draft outturn was because in 15-16, when you'd previously received an outturn, and then that significantly differed from when the accounts were audited because of issues like the one that you see on page 120 came out and then significantly altered the overspend that was previously reported. So one of the things I'm trying to avoid in 16-17 is to report to you today, which I just have and said it's a 585,000 overspend, and then something like this comes along, which, to be honest, I'm not ruling out because of the quality of the 16-17 data, but hopefully there's been a direction of travel that we are mitigating issues around this, but that did contribute to the 15-16 overspend.
Yeah, and I do recall quite a lot of hair being torn out about this particular instance from sort of August, September onwards last year. Okay, thank you.
Public, so the council do have to publicly
Thank you, Geraldine. Are there any questions?
Just quickly, what's your sort of view on direction of travel? We're clearly not there yet, but are we sort of getting there or not?
So our basis on my experience, I'd say, of 15, 16, and I'll base it on discussions I've been having with the chair, with your section officer and the chief executive for the last 9, 10 months. I can't base it on work I haven't done yet. That's my caveat. But I've just outlined 15, 16, let's face it, wasn't that great. And the opinions that we will be issuing will reflect that as auditors. And then I've seen how the council have, one, responded to our formal recommendations and accepted every single one of them, and have worked hard to try and implement that progress. And then I reflect on the fact that you're now just entering into a new era in terms of new financial system, borrowing, etc., which means that I think the trajectory is going up. But it's going to take time, and there's no magic wand for this. But the council are doing the right thing in terms of making sure they are responding to all those issues. Is that okay?
The press aren't going to report on that issue. Are there any more questions? Right, Geraldine, thank you. Have you got anything else? Right, lovely. Right, there are two motions which I outlined prior to this. Would you like me to read them again? Right. The first one is that the Grant Thornton interim audit plan be noted, and in particular the risks identified and the planned work, and two, that until full council determines otherwise, reports and plans from the council's external auditors may be referred direct to full council when agreed between the chairman of council and the chairman of the scrutiny committee. Unless you object, I intend to take both of those together. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Sims, seconded by Councillor Francis. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Right, agenda item 17. Before we move on to that, for the next council meeting, I intend to move updates from members into part 2, basically on the grounds that they are not items for decision, and it seems appropriate that they sit in part 2 rather than in part 1. We'll proceed as they are at the moment in part 1, and in which case I'll ask Councillor Williams, please, for his update and comments.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll say a few words, and then if it's okay with you, Aishling's going to say a little bit about the academy process as well, as I know there's public interest in that, and it's
yes,
a
please.
fast-changing environment. I think my report is probably self-explanatory. I had the pleasure of representing the council at a 2-day lead members training event in Coventry last week, which was very useful. The topics of discussion were very pertinent, and also it's very useful to liaise with other lead members and elected members from across the country. I attended a Safeguarding Children's Partnership meeting about 3 weeks ago, and the independent chair, weather permitting, will be over on Monday, and I'm looking forward to spending time with him as well. I think the rest of the notes, as I said, are self-explanatory. So unless there's any further questions, perhaps Aisling would like to talk about academy.
No, certainly, I think that's a pressing matter. I'd like to invite Aisling to speak, please. Speak up.
Thank you, Chairman. Basically, this is an update to members. A big caveat on this is about what's going on with the academy process. Elected members and myself don't have an influence over this process, but because you get asked things in the streets, and it's good to know things, it was good that I talked to you as members. I did brief quite a few of you at an informal session. But just to update you, as you know, the school is required to join a multi-academy trust, which are called MATS for short, and that decision for the sponsor lies with the Regional Schools Commissioner. So last early spring, it was proposed that a MAT called Venture would be the sponsor for the school, which would comprise Trevithick, which is an outstanding primary, and Mounts Bay Academy, which is an outstanding secondary. It was a very nascent MAT, so they needed to join together themselves. So the idea was to twin track Mounts Bay joining that MAT and the Five Island School joining that MAT. What's happened since is that Venture MAT and Mounts Bay aren't going to join up with each other, and that's entirely a decision for the respective sets of trustees for both of those organisations. The proposal going forward, back to the Regional Schools Commissioner, which is coming through our interim executive board, which the local authority has appointed, which is supported by our partners at the diocese and so on, is that Mounts Bay Academy apply to be a MAT, and that we join with them, and that we continue to buy strategic support, they buy strategic support from Trevithick Primary in order to get that primary expertise. And that decision on that should happen at either the head teacher board in October or November, and then we'll see where we go from there. We've done quite a lot of the legal work, which is a requirement of the local authority, or the legal transfer of the estate and the TUPE process for staff. For children and parents right now, what they'll see in school is pretty much what they saw for the last 2 terms, which is they've got, Mounts Bay have put in one of their senior leaders as the acting head teacher for a year, Jo Yates. Sarah Davey continues to lead on secondary, and Sean Powers continues to put in some quite fantastic primary specialism. So obviously for the school, changes in these things is always unsettling, and it's hard, and I think the school's gone through a lot of challenge over the last few years, to put it mildly. So that's where we are, but we do not have an influence over that. I'd also like to take this opportunity, not everybody was at the session this morning, but if any elected members would like to talk to me about the local authority role in education, I'd be happy to brief you, because contrary to popular perception, and actually some of the things said in various manifestos, local authorities don't run schools, and they haven't done for some time. We have defined powers and a basis for intervention. So we don't run the school, but we are currently, because the school is in special measures, we are kind of at maximum level of intervention, which is why we've appointed an interim executive board to act as the governance system. Now, the bit that does have an impact for the local authority is that we are funding that interim executive board, and it's running for far longer than was predicted. The Regional Schools Commissioner had a target date of June, and now here we are, nearly October. So that is adding a budget pressure. Myself and my senior officer did put in additional school improvement funding over the last couple of years, because we knew the issues that were likely to happen at school and that it needed some intensive support at some point, particularly when we wrote them a warning letter. And so if this wraps up soon, we're going to be okay, but any further than that, I'm worried that we're going to start having an overspend. So to that effect, I've put in an emergency funding bid to the Regional Schools Commissioner in order to support ongoing robust governance.
Thanks for that, Ashton. It's very useful, and also for any members of the public who listen in, which is why I would perhaps have an issue with lead member reports going to part 2, because we wouldn't have got that. We wouldn't have had well, okay, but I think it should be perhaps a little bit more consideration given before they go to part 2, because there may well be something with some meat in it. No, I completely get that. However, sometimes it's quite useful to you get a fuller discussion if it's in part 1 than you would do perhaps in part 2. I'm not saying every single occasion. Okay, well, that's fine, but I just think that should be borne in mind. I don't know what other members think, though, but I don't think we would have necessarily got that from Ashley then, and it was extremely useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'll take it as read. I'd just like to correct that the target of 105 houses should actually be homes and dwellings, not buildings. I'd just like to draw members' attention to October the 13th for the first local plan update meeting. By the end of next week, you should receive an email with a draft structure of the plan and setting out the vision and objectives, and I'd like members just to be aware of that and read that and bring any comments to the meeting. And then you'll get a whole... so there'll be a series of meetings after that, but we'll send out those times at the meeting, discuss which to make it beneficial for as many members as possible.
Thank you. And yet again, thank you, Councillor Davies. I know how much time you're putting into this as well, and it is very much appreciated. And it sounds a bit parsimonious of me to say, but there's a massive amount of time going in at the moment on foundation levels that we can't report details, and I do appreciate that. But I know Councillor Davies and I will report to you as soon as we've got anything concrete, any concrete progress that we've got. It takes a long time to get concrete progress, particularly with civil servants and the NHS administrations, but we are progressing as far as we can and as quickly as we can. Any questions of Councillor Davies? Thank you. Councillor Francis.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, members, you have the report in front of you, so hopefully most of that is self-explanatory. However, I have a couple of points, 2 points actually, that were raised in the minutes of the last meeting by our lead member for scrutiny. One was to do with the question about why our waste site did not have a time limit in its, or appears not to have a time limit to the end of its contract, and I understand that our senior member, senior officer has answered that question for you, so I won't go through it again now, but on that waste site we are looking at the end now next month. We are, dare I say it, hoping to be on site in October, so that's the good news. The other item, Chairman, also brought up by our lead member for scrutiny, was about EGNOS, which you and I tried to answer last time. Thank you for your help with that. But also our senior officer has now helped with a report on that, which you have in my report. I can further add to that we now have got to the point where we know that, or we're told that at the end, when we actually get EGNOS running, that it will provide a cloud base restriction of 300 feet above the airport. That's what the anticipated level will be, which is not in the report. But that will be what the outcome is. I've also got some good news to report, Chairman, that our new ATC, our new air traffic controller, has passed out this week, so we now have an extra one.
Would you like to rephrase that, please, Councillor Francis?
Well, I'm glad we have one laugh here today anyway. And I would also just like to finish by reporting that although I did thank our senior officer for the state of the roads and so on up country, which are excellent, you could eat your breakfast off them, we obviously have some difficulties which I know Councillor Sims referred to earlier, specifically up around Sallyport and going up the hill, moss and weeds and lots of other things which we need to put right. And I can report that our senior manager has that in hand, and that is on the table for doing very, very shortly. Thank you.
Right, there's just one thing that I would add to that is that I've had discussions with Craig as well as regards recycling, because I'm getting pressed by the community as and when, and the answer is as soon as possible. Is that correct, Craig?
Chairman, yeah, we'll see in the report that we're anticipating hopefully by potentially the end of this calendar year, certainly by the beginning of the next year, we're doing an awful lot of work, both actually within the officer level as well, actually with the operational services as well, to make sure that we can actually roll that out as quickly and smoothly as possible.
But it's something that the community wants, and I think it's something that we ought to report in open forum now, so that we are actually informing the community that this is on the table fairly quickly. Are there any further questions? Thank you. Councillor Grottick, Finance and Resource.
Thank you, Chair. You have my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Had a very useful meeting with members of the Scrutiny Committee, and we're all agreed we're going to work very closely on the finance issues. So I think really there's very little more to add, because we've had finance issues discussed today. We know we've still got ongoing challenges, but we really want to work hard with our 151 officer and the officers to move the financial situation forward. And I personally feel a little bit more optimistic, very much more optimistic than I did a few months ago, so I hope colleagues do too. Just a couple of points in my vice chair role, if I may. I sit on the local enterprise board, and the board actually came over, as members probably know, a short while ago. It was a very useful meeting, and then the board members actually had significant travel disruption, which was actually quite an eye-opener for them, I think, and actually I would say every cloud has a silver lining. But they did enjoy their visit, even though they got stuck. The Island Partnership hosted a business breakfast. Members of the local business community met with members of the local enterprise board, and that was a very positive meeting. And I would just say that both the chairman and myself are very grateful to Island Partnership for hosting that breakfast meeting, and we certainly would hope that we could be as supportive as possible of our key industry. Secondly, I've also attended a sponsor board recently on behalf of the chair, where we discussed progress of the collaborative arrangements, especially in finance and IT, with our Cornwall colleagues, and I enjoyed that very much. One thing we did agree was we need to work on communication, both internally and externally, and I'd just like to say that I hope we'll be able to address that in the short term, because it really, really is important. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Grottick, and I'd just like to offer my thanks for stepping in when I was unable to get there, because I was in London at the time doing other meetings. However, one word of reassurance is that I would like to reassure all members that the finance brief that is, as she said previously, supported by me. We are going forward as far as finance is concerned, and we're working closely together on that one. Are there any other further comments? Geraldine?
No, my understanding is that the Scrutiny Committee will keep to their terms of reference and scrutinise in the first instance the internal audit report, and then the findings and recommendations of those reports will be brought hopefully to the next full council meeting. In fact, there's been a slight delay while we actually work the system out, but I think the next council meeting will include a report that came to the Scrutiny Committee from Gateway Ashore, I believe in June or July. I haven't got the exact time in front of me.
And the external audit will be handled by full council for the moment.
Okay. Any other questions? Right. Thank you for that. And I would just like to reiterate my thanks to all the lead members for those reports. I can't give those sort of reports because I've not been involved in all the detail, and it is appreciated by everybody that we're all up to date. Oh, I've forgotten you, haven't I, Jonathan? I do apologise. Didn't mean to ignore you.
Well, it's more for other people to
Well,
comment.
I thanked you before you gave your report then. Councillor Smith.
So just to draw attention to items in my report, the Hitachi Run Smart Energy Islands is progressing very well. The PV panels on council-owned properties will be commencing very soon. The energy efficiency advice to businesses, the uptake's been very good so far and continues to progress well. And the communications has been significantly improved from that part of the project. We have appointed a general manager for the community interest company, which will provide the energy tariff to local people. So that person will be starting hopefully by the end of October. That's a really good development. And very soon we're expecting funding decisions on the anaerobic digester and gasifier and the electric vehicle infrastructure, which will be very significant parts of the project. So we're hopeful on those, and we'll report as soon as we're able to. Any questions?
Just on a personal basis, and thank you very much for that report, I've actually had the energy efficiency reduction advice visit on my own business. Very informative and useful. And I would, from the chair, encourage as many businesses on the islands to sign up for this. It could have potential significant financial savings for them. And that has got to be good.
Absolutely, and to reiterate, it's free.
It is. And what's more, it will reduce the carbon footprint of these islands. It's very, very well worth doing, and very well worth encouraging anybody that we know as councillors, and we are all communicators as far as that is concerned, to encourage all businesses, if we can, to get them signed up for it. Thank you for that, and I reiterate my thanks, and I apologise for ignoring you in the first place. Right. Moving on. Item 18. I'll pass this on to the Chief Exec, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I take the report as read. The report is around the appointment to the Pilots Widows Trust or Fund. In the report you will see a bit of background around this trust or this fund. It has been in operation for a very long time, and we're in the process of reviewing and reinvigorating the various trusts that the Council is supporting. So the report, I think, is clear. It provides the background, and we're now seeking to appoint 3 representatives to the trust, or trustees. It's the Council that appoint these trustees, although they don't necessarily need to be members. So the recommendation is that the Council appoint 3 named individuals who will be a trustee for a period of 4 years.
Councillor Guy.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to nominate Councillor Steve Watt.
Have we got a seconder? Yes. Councillor Sims. Councillor Grotty.
I'd just like to ask Councillor Guy if you'd be prepared to be nominated again.
Thank you for that, Councillor Grottick, but I'd like to step down as I'm also on a couple of other charity boards. So with that, can I nominate, please, Councillor Francis?
Have we got... Seconded by Vice Chair. Have we got a third?
Can I nominate Councillor Harry Legg, please?
Seconded by Councillor Guy. Are there any more nominations? I'll take them all together for all those 3 appointments. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Item 19. Appointments to the Communications Working Group. Andrew.
Thank you, Chairman. The report is as read. This was abandoned from the last meeting as we ran out of members, basically. So it's back before you now with the terms of reference set out at 2.1, and we're looking for 3 members. This was a recommendation of the DPP, by the way.
Sorry, Councillor Lady Barclay.
Chairman, can I ask, 2.2 says the group exists to support and challenge, etc. But it sounds, I was working on the basis that it would be like the previous communications working group, you know, who would compile items suitable for publication in the Lighthouse and so on, a real practical and active group. But this sounds more like a bit of a scrutiny committee in monitoring what goes out from the council to the public. And I would love to be a member of the first sort of communications group, but this would be, you know, not a group actually doing the communications.
Would you like to change the word challenge then?
Yes.
Promote?
That would help. Yes. Yes, that would be better.
Acceptable? Yeah, rather than challenge?
Yes.
Yeah. Vice Chair, you want to say something?
No, I would just agree with the comments from Councillor Barclay. I think a communications group's primary focus should be communication, which the peer challenge in August 2015 actually told us we didn't do very well. So I totally agree with that.
Okay. Further comments? So are we content that as and when we come to vote on this, that we vote on it with the word promote in there rather than challenge first? Yeah, I seem to get approval on the table with that. Comments? Further comments? Nominations? Councillor Barclay.
I'd like to propose Councillor Steve Watt. He's
Second.
got long experience in communications.
Seconded by Councillor Guy.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Steve Sims.
Seconded by Councillor Mumford. Yeah.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Barclay.
Seconded by Councillor Guy. We have 3 nominations. Are there any more? Right. And with that alteration of the word challenge to promote, I intend to take the recommendations 1 and 2 together. Can we have a proposer for 1 and 2, please? Councillor Sims, seconded by Councillor Guy. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Now we're moving on to section part 2 reports, which are for information only. You've got those in front of you, item 20 and 21. And subsequent to that, we are going to exclude the public from part 3. Under section 100A bracket 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public are excluded from the meeting for the following item of business on the ground that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 2, part 1 of Schedule 12A of that Act, as amended. Yes, can I have a proposal for exclusion of the public, please? Proposed by Councillor Grottick, seconded by Councillor Watt. All those in favour? That's unanimous. I would politely ask all members of the public to leave, please.